Now lists are something simple. We have unordered list, ordered list, and we have already practiced them enough. So this is unordered list UL with list items. This is ordered list with list items. Then we have description lists. So this is how it looks like. This is very good thing about W3. So you have a type. So it's coffee and it's data, right? Description type and description data. So this way, you have a description list. It's not used too much, but yeah, good to know that it exists. Okay. So these are some of the things related to lists. Unordered lists, we know. We can nest unordered lists or any of the lists, right? And yeah, good to go through these examples. Then we have ordered list and other list. So block and inline elements. Again, a very commonly asked interview question. What are block elements and what are inline elements? So every HTML element has default display value. And depending on what type of element it is, there are two display values, block and inline. If you are going for an entry-level interview, you can be pretty sure that you will be asked what's the difference between block level elements and what's the difference between inline elements. So block level elements always starts on a new line, and browsers by default add some space, a simple margin before and after the element. Okay, and it always takes up the full width available, so it stretches out to left and right as far as it can. And examples are paragraph element, div element. These are all block level elements. So this is a complete list of all the block level elements. Inline elements does not start on a new line, and they take up only as much space as necessary. So span, for example, is an inline element. It does not cause a line break. And these are a list of inline elements: anchor, abbreviation, acronym, bold, BDO, big, BR, button, so and so. The div element is often used as container for other HTML elements. So div element has no required attributes, but usually style, class, ID are commonly used. So when used together with CSS, div element can be used to style block of a content. Okay. Again, we have seen a lot of these. So for example, for a card, it can have a div and a heading and some paragraph. Span element is an inline container used to mark up a part of the text, the part of a document. And the span element has no required attributes, but style, class, ID are common again here. And when used together with CSS, span element can be used to style parts of text. For example, this is a paragraph, which is a block element. Inside this, we have a span. And if you try it yourself, the blue looks a bit different than dark green, okay? Because, and they are in the flow, they are inline, but styled differently using span. So there are two display values, block and inline. A block level element always starts on a new line and takes up the full width available. An inline element does not start on the new line, and it only takes up as much space or width as necessary. Okay? Then class attribute. The HTML class attribute is used to specify a class for an HTML element. Multiple HTML elements can share the same class. So using the class attribute, you have already, experienced it a lot. Again, it can have multiple classes and everything. So just go through it. Okay. ID, again, Then iframes. So you see, this is a web page in itself, and iframe has been used to display a web page inside a web page. See this? So you can use HTML iframe to display a web page within a web page. So iframe syntax looks something like this: iframe, source URL, title. Okay. It's a good practice to always include a title attribute for iframe, and this is used by screen readers to read out what the content of the iframe is. Okay. Height and width are usually commonly, used to specify the height and width. And by default, they use pixels, so you can ignore the unit. It's really simple. Basically, a frame inside which you load in another URL, right? So you can try this example yourself. So usually iframe has a sort of border, right? And it's inset. So you can remove border by styling it, okay, using the border property. Iframe can be used as the target frame for a link. The target attribute of the link must refer to the name attribute of the frame. What does it mean? So for example, here we have a paragraph and we have an anchor tag. Okay. Target is iframe_a. If you see here, we have an iframe and its name is iframe_a. What happens? Let's check out the example so it's very, very clear to you. So here what is going to happen if I click on w3schools.com? You see? So when the target attribute link matches the name of the iframe, link will open the iframe. Okay. Again, I'll refresh the page. So right now, this looks like empty, right? But as soon as I click on W3 Schools, you see that, this opens up. Again, let us see the code. So initially it was demo iframe.htm. Okay. And then when this link was clicked, because the target is iframe, this link opens up in this iframe. So iframe with a name, with some default source, a link with an href whose target is iframe. So then when the link is clicked, that particular page gets loaded in the iframe. Okay, pretty simple thing. Next, JavaScript. So we have this script tag inside which we can, write any JavaScript. Okay. We have seen these in DOM, or if you have not attended the JavaScript class, you will see that, you have these methods that document gives you, with which you can select by IDs, by, class, by basically as a simple, you can simply query a selector. Okay. The noScript tag defines an alternate content to be displayed to users. The users that have disabled scripts in their browser or have a browser that doesn't support scripts, right? So a very common interview question is that, suppose you have to show users a message that their browser does not support JavaScript. How would you do that? We do that using NoScript tag. Okay. File paths, again, if you see something like this, image source picture.jpg, this means that picture.jpg is located in the same folder as the current page. Okay, the index.html supposes the page. The folder in which, the level at which index.html is present, this image picture.jpg is also present in the same. If you see something like this, images/picture.jpg, so picture.jpg is located in the images folder, that is clear, but that images folder is in the current folder. Okay. But what is difference between this and this? Again, picture is located in the images folder, but where is the images folder? It is at the root of the current web. Okay, it's not necessary that images is present in the same folder as the HTML page. It is at the root of the web. What does two dot means? The folder is one level up from the current folder. Okay, so yeah, these are important. Absolute path is clear. It contains the entire path that can be accessed, and these are relative paths. Head, the head element. So the HTML head element is a container for elements like title, style, meta, link, script, base, etc. We have used HTML head a bit. Let's read through the documentation. So the head element is a container for metadata, the data about data, and is placed in between HTML tag and the body tag. So HTML meta is data about the HTML document. Metadata is not displayed, and metadata typically define the document title, character set, style, scripts, and other meta information. Okay. So what is title element? The title element defines the title of the document. The title must be text only, and it is shown in the browser title bar. So you see here HTML head elements. So this is the title. The title element is required in HTML documents. The content of page title is very important for search engine optimization. Okay. The page title is used by search engine algorithms to decide in order when listing pages in search results. So about title element, it defines a title in the browser toolbar. It provides a title for the page when it is added to favorites. It displays a title for the page in search engine results. So try to make title as accurate and as meaningful as possible. Very important, right? Then style. So these are all the elements that comes inside head. So style, again, to give, some style, write some CSS. Link. So link element defines the relationship between the current document and an external resource. Okay, for example, style sheets. So you may link a style sheet to the current document using the link tag. Meta. Okay. Although, you don't directly deal with meta a lot when you are in a beginner level, but I've seen lots of questions being asked related to meta in beginner level interviews as well. So it's good to go through it. The meta element is typically used to specify the character set, page description, keyword, author of the document, and viewport setting. Okay, so the interview question could be, what is meta element used for? And it's typically used to specify the character set, page description, keywords, author of the document, and viewport settings. Meta will not be displayed on the page, but are used by browsers. How to display content or reload page. Meta is used by browsers, search engines, and other web services. Character set, okay, UTF-8 is the most commonly used character set. Keyword for search engines, so meta name is equal to keywords, and content can be a comma separated list of keywords. Description of the page, so meta name and name is description and content is so and so. I'll just show you an example how important these things are. So suppose I look for HTML simplified, for example, and I get this, right? So HTML is the universal markup language for the web, so and so things you are reading here, right? Web building tutorial, so and so you are reading here. So where are these coming from? Let me open it in a new tab. If I search it here, you can see it's here, and this is something you are seeing here, okay? Also, if you see the page, if you inspect it, and you go to the head, so you have title, you have character set, you have viewport, you have lots of keywords, and you have description, okay? Let's see another one. For example, let's see this one, okay? I'll again copy this. I'll again open it in new tab. And again, I'll try to find it. Let's see what we have in the description here. So well organized and easy to understand web building tutorials. And yeah, so it's it's taking text from within the document, not from the description. But yeah, description is communicating something to the search engines. So if we can define the author of the page, so meta name is equal to author and content is the name of the author. It says to refresh the document every 30 seconds. So HTTP equiv refresh content 30. So this is basically the key and this is the value. Content is basically the value. Viewport, and we have a viewport. Okay. So we have a little bit description here about the viewport. So the viewport is user's visible area of the web page. It varies with the device. It will be smaller on a mobile phone than on a computer screen. You should include the following meta element in all your web pages. Meta name is viewport. Content width is device width. Again, I know I'm just reading out the page. Why? Because I'm sure if I let you do this, you won't be doing this. Okay. So I want it to be a part of curriculum that you go through, and it won't take much time. It will take a maximum of 4 or 5 classes to go through the entire HTML, and I want you to go through it before moving into the project. Okay. So viewport is the user's visible area of the web page. It varies with device. It will be smaller on a mobile phone than a computer screen. We should include meta, name, viewport, and content. This gives the browser instructions on how to control page dimensions and scaling. Width equals to device width part sets the width of the page to follow the screen width of the device. And initial scale 1 sets the initial zoom level of the page when the page is first loaded by the browser. Here is an example of web page without viewport meta tag and the same page with the viewport meta tag. Do you see this? Okay. So viewport is again a very important element. Now the HTML script element, if we can write some client-side code, some JavaScript inside that. Now what is base element? The base element specifies the base URL or target for all the relative URLs in the page. So the base tag must have an href or the target attribute present or both. There can only be one single base element in your document. Okay. So what does this mean? So if the base inside your head is set to this href, then this image, you know, we can assume safely that it would be, the absolute path will be this, and then / images and so and so. Okay. So these are a couple of meta elements used inside head. Okay. Title, style, link, meta, script, base. Layout. So there are lots of layout techniques, and we have already learned Flexbox and CSS Grid. So yeah, feel free to go through these. Yeah, this is very important. And you know, this entire layout can be built using div, right? Div can be used for header, div can be used for nav, div can be used for sections, div can be used for article, div can be used for aside or sidebar, div can be used for footer. But in the interview, you will be surely asked that what are semantic elements and what is the utility of them, and hence, you know, you should be using semantic elements, right, in your project. So div does not communicate anything to the assistive technologies like screen readers, right? And div does not communicate much to the developers. Semantic means the word that has meaning, that speaks for itself. So header is a semantic layout element, and it is used to define header of a document or a header of a section. Okay. Nav defines a set of navigation links. Section defines a section in a document. It can have its own header. Article defines an independent self-contained content. Aside defines a content aside from the content, like a sidebar. Footer defines footer of a document or a section. Details define additional details that the user can open and close on demand. Summary defines a heading for the details element. Okay, so for example, there is a summary, and when you click on this, you get details, right? So this is detail summary. So name some semantic elements. Okay, so these should be coming in your mind: header, nav, section, aside, footer, articles. So these are semantic elements. They communicate much more than div to developers and assistive technologies and browsers. So different techniques to create multi-column layout are CSS frameworks like Bootstraps, Flexbox, Grid. We don't use floats anymore. Okay. So yeah, Bootstrap is one of the most common CSS framework. Here is an example of float. Feel free to look at it. Flexbox and CSS Grid, I'm sure you are champions at it by now. Responsive web design. So one thing we have seen that the meta viewport is important, so that the contents width is device width and initial scale is 1. Okay. So this thing is important from the HTML point of view. Then, often, you apply a style of 100%, width of 100%. Then we have max width thing. Again, it's best to do these in the CSS. Picture element, I have already described you, and it's important to, understand and get good with picture and source set things. Okay. So just spend some time with picture. Responsive text sizes can be set with viewport width unit, which means that viewport width. That way the text size will follow the size of the browser window. Okay. So if I say font size to be 10 viewport width, then the font size will follow, the size of the viewport. You can try it yourself. Media queries, we have already, explored them. So media for all screens and max width. Okay. Max width means 0 से लेकर 800 तक. Max 800 तक. Min width means 800 onwards. So those two are two different approaches. Here is a full example of responsive web. You may try them yourself. Okay. So yeah, we have covered almost all of these, but yeah, feel free to go through the documentation. So computer code or source code, how do you so this example, for example, if I try it, this looks like this. Usually it uses the Courier font, and it's it looks like a code, right? HTML KBD for keyboard input. The HTML KBD element is used to define keyboard input. The content inside is displayed in the browser's default monospace font. So save the document by pressing Control plus S. So Control plus S would show like this. SAMP. Okay, it is short for sample output. So SAMP element is used to define sample output from a computer program. The content inside is displayed in the browser's default mono font, right? So again, these are semantic, and they tell you something about what is inside it, right? What the element represents. Div, on the other hand, does not communicate much with you, right? So this was the output from your computer. So if you do that inside SAMP, so that's a sample output. Code, again, we have already seen. Pre, what it does is it preserves the line breaks and white spaces. So again, the same example with pre, it preserves the line breaks. Okay. So whenever you are showing any source code in your web page, then you use pre and then code. Code gives it nice monospace, and pre preserves the formatting. Now var. So var element is used to define a variable in programming or mathematical expression. The content inside is typically displayed in italic. Okay. So for example, the area of triangle is so and so, where B is base and H is vertical height. So these are variables, right? So they are inside var. Again, these are not important, but always, good to know. So these are displayed in italics. Or, for throughout the page, for all the variables, you can define a different CSS. So we have keyboard input, sample output, code, var, pre, all of these for code, computer code, showing computer code in your web page. Semantics, we briefly touched upon it, but it is so important, so important that I'll go through this page again. Semantic elements simply means elements with meaning. So what are semantic elements? A semantic element clearly describes its meaning to both browser and the developer, and also assistive technologies. Example of non-semantic elements are divs, spans. It tells nothing about its content, right? But semantic elements like form, table, article clearly defines its content. So there are many website contain HTML codes like div id equals to nav, div class equals to header. They will perfectly work. There is no problem with the functionality, right? But it is always advisable to use semantic elements to use different parts of the web page. Okay. And these are a comprehensive list. We have articles, we have a site, we have details, fig caption, figure, footer, header, main, mark, nav, section, summary, time, all of them with a meaning, right? So let's see one by one. Section. Again, don't worry about remembering every word of it, but you should be knowing that this thing exists. Very important. You should be knowing that this thing exists. The section element defines a section in a document. According to W3C's HTML documentation, a section is a thematic group of content, typically with a heading. And examples of where sections element can be found are chapters, introductions, news items, contact information. Okay. So they are section of a document. So a web page could normally be split into sections for introduction, content, and contact information. Okay, let us open this. Now, all of these could have been inside div. This could have been div. This could have been div, right? So here, this is a section. This section has a heading and some description, right? This is another section with some heading and some description, right? So they are different sections of the page. The article element specifies independent self-contained content. An article should make sense of its own, and it should be possible to distribute it even independently from the rest of the website. So an example of article could be forum posts, blog posts, user comments, product cards, newspaper articles. Okay. So these are articles. So for example, we have these four, independent pieces of content, and they are independently for example, you have a list of blog posts. Okay. So those blog posts are independent, right? They can be used or distributed out of context. So those are very good candidates for articles. So you can see that article, these are all individual articles here. Okay. The intuition develops as you use them more and more. Okay. Now at times, let's see. So the title here is nesting article in section or section in article. So article element specifies independent self-contained content, and section element defines the section of a document. So we can use definitions to decide how to nest those elements. We cannot, right? Can we use definitions to decide how to nest those elements? We cannot. So you will find HTML pages with section elements containing article elements and article elements containing section elements. Okay. So you will find both when you go through websites, and don't be very confused. It's a matter of personal preference and personal understanding. But usually in my experience, I usually have articles, and that article may contain some sections, right? So I have often used, articles within sections, but also I have seen sections within articles. So there is a blurry line. Don't overthink it. Whenever in doubt, ask your technical architect what's the best approach. The header element represents a container for introductory content of a set of navigational links. A header element typically contains one or more heading elements, logo or icon, authorship information. And you can have several header elements in one HTML document. But headers cannot be put inside footer, address, or other header elements. Okay. So this is an article. An article has a header, right? And this is, the data. The footer element defines a footer for a document or a section. A footer element typically contains either the authorship information, copyright information, contact information, sitemap, back to top links, and related documents. And you can have several footers in one document. Okay. Nav element defines a set of navigation link. Again, notice that not all links of a document should be inside nav. Nav is intended for the major block of navigation links. Okay. So in the page that you are seeing, the W3 schools page, which is the nav? This is the nav. Okay. So don't use nav for each and every link. For the major block, asides are usually sidebars. Okay. A side element defines some content aside from the content that is placed in, like sidebar. And a side content should be indirectly related to the surrounding content. Okay. So you can see the examples. Okay. Figure and fig caption, very important. Very important. Okay. So figure tag specifies self-contained content like diagrams, photos, code listings, etc. And fig caption is a tag that defines a caption for the figure element. So fig caption element can be placed as the first or as the last child of the figure element. The image element defines the actual image or illustration. Okay. Let's click on this. So here, this is a figure image and this is the fig caption. Okay. And, visually also it's very, very good. Okay. Visually it's very good. But it conveys a lot of meaning when people use assistive technologies like screen readers. Okay. Then it's very important. So there is a very clear, clear communication with the browser that, this is a figure and this is its caption. There can be multiple text around, but this is something that describes, or that is the caption, right? Most significant information about the illustration. So why semantic elements? According to W3C, a semantic web allows data to be shared and reused across applications, enterprise, and communities. And these are a quick summary of semantic elements. Style guide. So a consistent, clean, and tidy HTML code makes it easier for others to read and understand your code. Here are some guidelines and tips for creating a good HTML code. Always declare a document type. Okay, so these are some of the recommendations. Okay, always declare a document type. Lowercase element names, right? Close all HTML elements. Lowercase the attribute names. Always quote the attribute values, so these should be quoted. Always specify alt width height for images. I don't 100% agree with this part, but yeah, for alt it's very important. So yeah, you can use equals space in between and after equals, but keep it consistent whatever you do. Okay. According to W3 schools, these spaces are bad, so don't keep spaces. Avoid long code lines. Make use of white spaces. Never skip title element. Okay, so these are some of the recommendations by W3 schools. Always, your page should always have HTML and body tags. Head tag, again, it's optional, but you should be having it. Close empty HTML elements. Add the lang attributes in HTML. Okay. Metadata is important for both search engine indexing and it communicates a lot of data about the page. Setting viewport is, again, this line is quite important. It has been repeated so many times, right? Comments, okay, use comments wherever required. Style sheets, usually they should be, external style sheets. JavaScript, again, it should ideally be external as much as possible. So yeah, so these were a couple of recommendations to make your HTML look more professional. Now HTML entities. This is something that you should be knowing. I touched upon this somewhere, but yeah, it's good to know this again. So there are reserved characters in HTML and they must be replaced with character entities. So for example, if you use less than or greater than signs in your text, your browser might mix them with tags. Okay? And character entities are used to display reserved characters in HTML. And character entities look something like this. Okay? So they are either and entity name or and pound entity number. So for example, for less than sign, you must either write and less than, so this is and entity name, or and pound 60. So from now onwards, whenever you see these kind of HTML entities, don't get very surprised. Whenever you see hash and number or some name after ampersand, just know that they are HTML entity. Advantage of using an entity name is easy to remember. Disadvantage, browsers may not support all entity names, but the support for entity numbers is very, very good. Don't worry, use these. Don't need to worry about this. So non-breaking space. So a commonly used entity in HTML is non-breaking space, NBSP. Non-breaking space is a space that will not break line into a new line. So there will be a space, but it won't break. Two words separated by non-breaking space will stick together, not break into the new line. And this is handy when breaking a word. When breaking the words might be disruptive, right? So for example, these are using the non-breaking thing. Another common use of non-breaking space is to prevent browsers from truncating spaces in HTML pages. So if you have suppose 10 spaces here and you don't want HTML to truncate them, then you use NBSP. Okay. This is the number for hyphen. So here are a couple of commonly used HTML entities: non-breaking space, less than, greater than, ampersand, quote, quotation mark, single quotation mark, cent, pound, yen, euro, copyright, and registered trademark. And yes, these entity names are case sensitive. Now, about diacritical marks, okay? So you often see these accents, right? These are called grave, and these are called acute accents. So diacritical marks can appear both above and below a letter or inside a letter, okay? Diacritical marks can be used in combination with alphanumeric characters to produce a character that is not present in the character set used in the page. So for example, character A with this grave mark can be done like this. A character with acute accent can be done like this. So, these marks, we have HTML entities for them, and they are numbers, as you can see, right? So we have HTML entities for all of these. You can try them out. You can try them with different characters. Symbols are not present in your keyboard can also be added using entities. So HTML entities we have already seen. Now many mathematical, technical and currency symbols are not present in a normal keyboard. To add such symbols to the HTML page, you can use the entity name or the entity number. For example, the euro sign with an entity name and a decimal and an hexadecimal value. So here, the same thing is done using an entity name and euro. This is using entity decimal number, and this is done using hexadecimal number. Again, just be aware that you have all of these mathematical characters available. So here's a list. You don't need to remember any of these. Just know that they exist. So in a program, in your project, when you know that, you have to print something like this, just search for HTML entities or HTML symbols. What you need to search for, that is also a super valuable information, right? Then there are Greek letters. These are also supported. You have number and you have the names both. And some other, for example, these arrow signs. This and left arrow and up arrow. These are useful. I often use them, right? Up arrow, right arrow. Then spades, clubs, hearts, diamonds. So these are some important symbols. These are called emojis. And emojis are characters from UTF-8 characters. So they are by default supported by web. So UTF covers almost all of the characters and symbols in the world. Okay. Emojis like images, icons. Emojis look like images or icons, but they are not. They are letters, they are characters, right? They are Unicode character set. They are from the Unicode character set. So if you think of UTF-8 characters, A is 65, B is 66, C is 67. Okay. So if you want to display ABC, you can very well do, 65, 66, 67. So you have an ampersand and because you are using number, so you can have this hash. This meta character set element defines the character set. Characters A, B, C are displayed by number 65, 66, 67. To let browser understand that you are displaying a character, you must start with an entity number with ampersand and hash and end it with a semicolon. Okay. So there are different emojis and their numbers are, for example, for this one, this is the number. For this is the number. For this is the number. Okay. And you use them this way. Starts with ampersand hash and ends with semicolon. Just this bit of knowledge, you'll feel so much comfortable when you see these numbers now, right? You know what's happening. These are simply character sets. UTF-8 numbers hai ye, and you are displaying these using this format. Now, you have heard me speaking about character sets a lot. And you must have heard something called ASCII. So ASCII was also a character set. UTF-8 is also a character set. But what was the shortcoming of ASCII? That it had only 128 characters. And English wale characters like 0 to 9, letters A to Z in small and cap, and some characters. So very limited, 128 different characters were in the ASCII character set. Okay. But, these days browsers render almost all languages beautifully. They, render, different, emojis beautifully, right? So for this, it needs a very big character set, and that standard now is UTF-8. So go through this document and it will give you some more clarity about what a character set is. Okay. So basically, your takeaway should be that UTF-8, is identical to ASCII for values from 0 to 127, but it has many more characters, values. UTF-8 does not use values from 128 to 159. UTF-8 is identical to both ANSI and 88591 in these values. Continues value from 256 with more than 10,000 different characters. Okay. So almost all languages, everything is used, is included. It's inclusive of that. So what are URLs? HTML Uniform Resource Locators. A URL is another word for web address. A URL can be composed of words or an internet protocol or IP address, right? So most people enter the name when surfing because names are easier to remember than numbers. Web browsers request pages from web servers by using URLs. A uniform resource locator is used to address a document on the web. So here the first part is the scheme. So HTTPS is the scheme. This is the prefix, which is www. This is the domain, w3schools.com. This is the path, and this is the file name. Okay. Here is a simple explanation. Scheme defines the type of internet service. Most common is HTTP or HTTPS. Prefix defines the domain prefix. The default for HTTP is www. Domain defines the internet domain name like w3schools.com. Port defines the port number at the host. The default for HTTP is 80. Path defines the path at the server if omitted the root directory of the site. And file name defines the name of the document or the resource. Common URL schemes are HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, and file. HTTP is for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, common web pages. S is for secured one, they are encrypted. FTP are for files, which are for downloading or uploading files, and is a file on your computer. URL encoding. URLs can only be sent over an internet using ASCII character set. If a URL contains characters outside of ASCII, the URL has to be converted. So URL encoding converts a non-ASCII characters in the format that can be transmitted over the internet. URL encoding replaces non-ASCII characters with percentage followed by hexadecimal digits. URLs cannot contain spaces. URL encoding normally replaces a space with a plus sign or percentage 20. Okay. So if you click submit, the input was received as so and so. Okay. So space, etc. were changed, and also these character with accents, they were modified. Okay, now you know what's happening. So these are some of the ways these things are managed. Finally, in today's class, just a little bit is remaining in HTML. HTML forms we'll look in the next class. Then we'll look into a little bit of Canvas, and then a little bit about media, a bit about not much remaining. So let's complete the HTML versus XHTML part today. XHTML is stricter, more XML based version of HTML. So XHTML stands for Extensible Hypertext Markup Language. It's more stricter, more XML based version of HTML. Now why XHTML? First of all, it's supported by all major browsers. Okay. XML is a markup language where all documents must be marked up correctly, be well formed. XHTML was developed to make HTML more extensible and flexible to work with other data formats such as XML. In addition, browsers ignore errors in HTML pages and try to display the website even if it has some errors in the markup. So XHTML comes with much stricter error handling. So if you want to study XML, so there is a tutorial for that. We don't really need that now. The most important differences from HTML. In XHTML, doc type is mandatory. Okay. XMLNS attribute in HTML is mandatory. HTML head, title, body are mandatory. Elements must always be properly nested. Elements must always be closed. They must always be in lowercase. So it's a much stricter form of HTML. Okay. And attributes must be recorded. Minimization is forbidden. So you can read through this, but yeah, just know that it's a much stricter form of HTML. So we have already gone through all of these in the tutorial section, and you can see that it's very, very, very easy. Except for image map, nothing was complicated. Everything was super simple for you. Okay, so you don't need to remember all of this. Just remember all the semantic, some of the semantic elements and what are the use of them. Okay, and whenever you get stuck anywhere, you know where to look for it. And yeah, that is why I went through all of this, because even if you have heard it once, even if you don't remember all of these, you know that they exist, and that is most important. When you're asked about any of these things, your face should not be blank. You should have at least something to speak about them. Okay, so yeah, it was good. It was quick, nice.